Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of Welcome to the Scene podcast. If you're a first-time listener, this podcast is about the early 2000s emo scene and the band members and stories that made it, to this day, one of the most special music scenes to have existed. Today's guest is Cory Murchy, the bass player for Minus the Bear. Minus the Bear was one of those unique outliers in the scene, a mix of mathy rock mixed with catchy dance tunes and funny song titles. They set themselves apart from others in the scene. Born out of the ashes of Pacific Northwest hardcore band icon Botch and the band Kill Sadie, Minus the Bear's 18-year career solidified them as icons in the scene. Listen as Cory and I talk about his own unique background and part in the band, as well as what has driven him after the band's breakup. Let's get right to it and let me welcome you to the scene. I just kind of wanted to start out just by kind of asking you where you grew up.
Grew up kind of a few different places. I was actually born up in Olympia, Washington. My parents are from Aberdeen, Washington. We lived in West Seattle, between West Seattle and Aberdeen, for about the first 6 years of my life. Then we moved down to Los Angeles so that my dad could pursue a musical career.
Okay.
Was there for about another 6 years till I was about 13. And then we made the move to Santa Fe. And so when somebody asks, really, where did I grow up? I always kind of say Santa Fe because that was, definitely my formative years.
Yeah.
So Santa Fe by way of LA, by way of Seattle.
Yeah. And Aberdeen, of all places.
Yeah.
You never hear great things about Aberdeen. You only hear about the depressing side of Aberdeen, and obviously because Kurt Cobain and all that stuff. But
it's true. It's a shame too, because back in the day it was really quite a prosperous little logging town. My grandfather was a logger and was involved with the shake and shingle industry. And through the 40s, 50s, 60s, even some of the 70s, it was prosperous. But then, once the lumber industry kind of fell out, it definitely went downhill. But yeah, funny enough about Kurt Cobain, my mom actually used to babysit him. So when Nirvana came out, it was quite a big deal for us.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, it's like I used to change that kid's diapers.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, it was kind of a point of pride and kind of a realization that, a kid out of Aberdeen could make music happen. So it kind of, truthfully inspired me to go ahead and just say, yeah, if him, why not? Why not me?
Right. Well, you said your dad went to pursue music. What kind of music was he involved in?
Rock and roll. He was a singer songwriter. To be honest, moving down to LA, the dream was for him to be able to pursue music because that's where the industry was. But the realities of raising two kids set in pretty quick, and really, he didn't do too much down there. Some of my first memories were being on the road with him up in the Pacific Northwest. Being in a smoky bar while a bar band was playing. But he still plays to this day. But
that's awesome.
It turned out a little different for him. So
yeah. Well, everybody, I feel like everybody as a musician, your goal, if you want to make it a career, right? That's the dream. If you can make money doing it, and you got to do that. So I'm sure it's cool for him to see that.
He's very proud, very, very supportive. Yeah. So I'm very lucky in that. And he understood, what I was going through and dealt with. And so that it's definitely something really special that we're able to share.
So in going in kind of being raised around like rock and roll and stuff like that, what were some of the I guess for you, some of your formidable influences, I suppose, or just like that you really took to as a kid or as a teenager?
As far as music wise,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I grew up with, the classics, the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Queen and all those bands. In fact, I remember my dad, when CDs were first starting to come out, he would make a point of picking up uh, each Beatles record, each English version of the Beatles CD. And it would be something that we would all kind of, my sister and I and him and my mom too, like would listen to and kind of yeah, just the exposure to that like was really important. And I think, we would listen to songs and he'd be like, all right, can you tell what the bass part is or what the guitar part is, or oh, do you know who's singing here? And so it kind of clicked my brain on to kind of break down music in that way.
Oh, that's awesome.
um so yeah, that was pretty cool. So
Uh,
yeah, a lot of the classics like that, singer songwriter stuff.
yeah. Did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I've got one younger sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Were you a large influence on her as far as music goes?
Probably a little bit. And we kind of had our own like music journeys as well. Like, I mean, I remember, she got really into Guns N' Roses when I really got into The Cure,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but we would be able to kind of, we both loved Nirvana, but she loved Soundgarden a little more, and I loved Pearl Jam a little more,
Right.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah. Well, I have an older brother. That's kind of the reason. Like all of my musical influences, we're about 4.5 years apart, and all of my musical influence, came through him. Whether it was like
sure.
starting off with rap or like whatever, I just kind of followed whatever he did. The only
Yep.
diverging kind of aspect happened is when I started getting into more like indie and like emo, whatever you want to call it. Was like super important music to me, but my brother really loved like singer songwriter and stuff, so we would always kind of clash a little bit in the sense. And I was like, you do that thing where you're like, you should listen to this, oh no, you should listen to that, and nobody's really listening to anything. Like they're
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
suggesting things to each other.
Just by the nature of being siblings, you're
Right.
like,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
No.
that
But
individuation that comes around. I mean, and what I
yeah.
mean, I rarely get to interview bass players. Was bass like your thing when you first started off, or did you start with guitar? Or
Yeah, it really was. You know, my parents did, did have us take piano lessons, early on. But to be honest, I really didn't pay much attention, and just, my thought was like, I'm never going to use music in my future. Like this is, remember, this is the era of Top Gun, and I was hell bent on being a fighter pilot for the
nice.
U.S. Navy. Uh, you know, cut a couple years later, and it was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this music stuff is all right. Yeah, and I think I gravitated towards the bass just because, um, one, those were the parts that I always just really enjoyed. I loved the low end and just kind of keeping the rhythm with the drums and kind of, its own musical place that it sits within songs. And then also, like, it was a time where, I knew so many guitar players, and it was like, I don't want to just be another guitar player. I was
Right.
like, bass is where it's at. So
I mean, a good a
yeah.
good a good bass player was worth their weight in gold for sure. They're that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of like myself included, but like a lot of guitar players who are like, yeah, I can play bass, but like I can't find the pocket really well, or like I think to specifically hone in on just being a bass player like is awesome, because to really be a good bass player, you have to like really focus on that, especially with the kind of music that you guys were making for sure. The bass was a huge standout, I think, in Minus the Bears music, to me. But there was there's some information that you were big into the ska scene.
Yeah, yeah, still am. Love ska, love reggae, dub. And as a bass player, that is kind of a paradise, as far as a lot of the bass kind of leads and propels that music. And so yeah, I mean, I was just naturally drawn to it. I loved it. It was, ska and reggae and dub, like, it was so foreign to what I grew up with.
Right.
Like I grew up with classic rock and alternative rock, and so when I found the Specials and the Scotalites and those bands like the English Beat and Toots and the Maytals, it was kind of revelatory as far as like, whoa, this music is so moving to me, and it also the bass had such a central role to it. So it was pretty exciting,
Yeah.
and that music was really something that I kind of found on my own. It wasn't something my parents showed me. That was something that I, found with my friends at the time. And so, yeah, it spoke to me and really still does. And I'll defend ska and reggae and dub till the
Yeah, I don't
my
like
dying breath.
I don't know why it gets such a shitty rap. I think there's some sort of meme about it, right? Because like you had the explosion of ska in the late '90s, and with the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and all that stuff, and I mean everybody was into it, and then all of a sudden it just kind of like dropped. I still listen to like bands like Five Iron Frenzy and like kind of some of those types of bands. Like it's just fun music. But
Sure.
what you're talking
Yeah.
about, to you, it moved you in a sort of way. Like what moved you about it? Like what was your emotional connection to it?
Well, I think particularly with the older stuff, I think there is some merit. Sorry, my wife is coming, so my dogs are
Okay.
going to be blowing up. Um, I think when you look back at the '60s and the '70s and even '80s movements of ska and reggae, like it was pretty. It was cutting edge for the time, and it was revolutionary, and it really had a message and a political
Right.
message. The stuff coming out of Jamaica during the '60s was independence music. They had just gained their country back, and a lot of that spoke to that. There was also the whole dancing and having a good time aspect of it, but a lot of the message was pretty political
Right.
and pretty revolutionary. And then you look at the '70s and '80s, British two tone.
Yep.
Once again, that was super revolutionary and political and had a message. Um, you know, I, I hate to say it, but I mean, I kind of understand people if their first um, listen and their only entrance to particularly ska is like some of the '90s stuff. Like,
Right.
yeah, some of it gets a little goofy.
Right.
um, and that's okay. But it's I look at that older stuff, and it it changed the way I thought, and it brought you know a political mindset and movement and racial equality and all of that to the forefront of things that really weren't being talked about in other types of music. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the way I look at it.
I think there's a huge
And
component, history wise, that people don't know about as far as like the political
yeah,
roots and the racial equality and working class roots and stuff like that, and in Britain and things like that. Like
it,
it yeah, there's
yeah,
a
yeah,
whole long history
absolutely. The
behind
whole
it.
Absolutely, the whole working class ethos and messaging really, spoke to me, and as a, skinny white kid in Santa Fe, New Mexico, of all
Right.
places.
Right.
Like I was able to be like, yeah, I feel that. I get it. I understand that. So,
Was the ska scene big in Santa Fe, or
nothing in Santa Fe is too big.
yeah?
It's intimate, but I think that was kind of the nice thing about it too, is that, like, growing up, you like to be a part of something special.
Just kind of speaking of, like, so the ska scene in Santa Fe, you said wasn't very
Oh,
large. Um, but were you involved in any bands, ska bands in Santa Fe?
I was, yeah. Started a band called the Soul Scats, very
Nice.
ska.
Yeah.
Yeah, with some friends, and it was a lot of fun. We played all over Santa Fe and Albuquerque. Went up to Colorado a couple times, and sorry, I just ran up the stairs. It was yeah, it was exciting. It was definitely my first foray into setting up shows and showing up at bars and playing bar shows, and with older bands, and yeah, it was super exciting.
So how do you get from Santa Fe? What brings you all the way to Seattle?
So, after I graduated from high school, uh, I knew that I wanted to play music. I didn't know exactly how to make that happen, but I knew that it wasn't going to necessarily happen in Santa Fe. Um, so I knew I had to get out of town. And I picked Seattle just as a place that, was a good sized city. I was somewhat familiar with it. I knew, from my dad's history, like, moving to Los Angeles wasn't like the place or situation to do,
Right.
and the East Coast didn't really, uh, speak to me. So Seattle, just seemed like a good spot to land. I didn't know anybody up there.
I was going to
I
ask if
moved
you
up.
knew anybody, or what, like how that worked out
Yeah,
for you.
no, I didn't. I moved up with a buddy from Santa Fe who was going to school at UW, and so we got a little shitty apartment on the in the U district. And basically, I gave myself 2 years to, I said, I'll give myself 2 years to get into a band, to play music, to tour, to record, and if it didn't happen within 2 years, then I would reevaluate and kind of make some decisions from there. And about a year and a half into it, I was able to meet some people, and that the rest is kind of history. It
Yeah.
worked out.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Uh,
what year is this that you moved to Seattle?
so it was 99,
Okay.
summer of 99. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so tell me just like how you ended up meeting the other guys. Obviously, Maya Sabir was an amalgamation of Kill Sadie and Botch. The breakup of those two other bands. But how did you get involved, or how did you meet those guys, or like what was the formation of the band?
Sure.
Like how that came about?
Um, yeah. So I grew up and went to high school with this guy, Aaron Turner, and he went on to start Hydra Head Records, and was in a band called ISIS, and is now in a band called Sumac, and has been and very prolific with his career. But
Yeah.
we grew up, and he was a year or two older than me, so he moved to Boston before I was out of high school, and uh, had this record label, Hydra Head, and had signed Botch, actually. So I ended up at a bar called the Cha Cha, which is kind of where everyone from the music scene in Seattle gravitated towards, and it was kind of like our clubhouse, for better or for worse. Um, and I saw Dave there one night, and I knew that he was in Botch, and so I walked up to him and introduced myself and said, my name's Cory. I just moved here from Santa Fe. I know Aaron. And that first night I said, we should start a band together.
Both.
And yeah. Well, I'm just dumb enough to think that it could work. Right. Um, and he kind of laughed. And I mean, this is, right as Botch is, in the swing of things. I think We Are the Romans had already come out, and they're an established band in the heavy hardcore scene. But we hit it off, and became fast friends. And he introduced me to Aaron from Kill Sadie and Jay and all those guys, and Jake from Sharks Keep Moving. And so while we didn't start the band right that night, we became fast friends, and he introduced me to other people. Ultimately, that's how I joined Kill Sadie, because they were looking for a bass player at the time. And so it was just, man, I was just in the right time, in the right place. And like I said, just dumb enough to think that I could make it work. So,
or incredibly smart, because it ended up working really well for
it worked. Yeah.
many years. It's funny. I just got a reminder. I have this thing called Concert Archives, where you can just kind of like do all your different concerts that you've been to. And it was like 20 years ago today, you went to go see Minus the Bear and Braid in Sayreville, New Jersey. Because I'm I'm originally from the East Coast, and I live in Vancouver, Washington now. But
cool.
I mean, all the shows that I would go to were in New Jersey, and I ended up meeting. How I actually became familiar with Minus the Bear was I was going to school in Oklahoma, and I was at a religious university there. But we had a group of guys who were really kind of like into music, and my friend Eric, he was into all sorts of different bands, and especially on like Deep Elm and different labels like that. And he was like, if you want, like, I have all this music, like if you want to go through it, you can just kind of listen to it. And that's how I found like Red Animal War, which is a fantastic band. And then he had, I think, Highly Refined Pirates on there. And that's when I first heard My Severe. So it was about 2002, 2003 ish. And I just instantly fell in love with it. And I was like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, it was like nothing I'd ever heard before in my life. Like,
that's awesome.
I think as a guitar player, and like not being as exposed to like any music, hearing Dave's playing and hearing some of that finger tapping and kind of like the math rockiness of it just kind of blew me away. And that just kind of like started sort of an obsession. When you guys were writing music together, was there any sort of intention of like, this is what we want this to sound like in the very beginning?
I think since most of us kind of came from that heavy hardcore background, it wasn't necessarily what we were listening to on a day-to-day basis, right? Like when you're playing that kind of music, like sometimes the last thing you want to hear is more chugga chugga,
right?
And maybe a little more hip hop or dance oriented music, or you start branching out and thinking, okay, what else is out there? I don't think there was ever like a manifesto of this is what we're setting out to do, but it was everyone listening to all these, like I said, dance music, R&B, hip hop, pop, in my case, dub and reggae and ska, and kind of everyone coming together and realizing like, okay, this band, we don't have to write those chugga chugga riffs. Like we don't have to go into that because we're just making it up right now. Like we don't have to do a genre, that is pigeonholing us into one thing or another. And I think it just really freed us up. I always say I'm just dumb enough to think that I can make it happen. And then I also made a point of surrounding myself with the best players that I could find. Dave Knutson is one of them. He can play his ass off with guitar and is super innovative with what he came up with, and with the pedal work that he was doing, trying to make a guitar not sound like guitar.
Right.
And it was super innovative and super super inspiring, I think, for everybody. And so we all just, I think, were able to feed off of that, and oftentimes my job was to come in and be like, okay, what the fuck do I play to this?
Right.
Or even better, like, what do I not play to this? And sometimes it was easier than others. It was always a challenge, but it was always exciting.
Yeah, one of the
things I think we allowed ourselves to experiment and have fun with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you guys put out this is what I know about being gigantic, and I forget, were you on Suicide Squeeze then, or was that independently?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, how'd you guys get hooked up with Suicide
It was Suicide Squeeze. So Aaron Tate, our drummer, was friends and friendly with David Dickinson early on and introduced us. And I remember him giving David a couple demos, and David really enjoyed it and liked it and decided asked us to do a 7-inch. And this is before we'd even played a show. And so we were like, awesome, let's do it. Why not? So we went into the studio and recorded what ended up being the Gigantic EP. And we're like, well, we've recorded all this stuff, but we can give you these 2 songs. And David was like, nah, let's do an EP.
Nice. Yeah.
Like a CD EP. And so we were like, all right, let's do it. And so we actually had those, I think the release came out October 14th, but we had copies for our first show, which happened to be September 14th, 2001. Only a couple days after 9/11.
Yeah.
So it was, it was wild. I remember, showing up to practice to get ready for this show on 9/11, and we all kind of looked at each other and we were like, are we playing?
Like,
what's going on? It was just like, yeah, we've got to,
Yeah. Where did you guys play your first show?
I was at the Paradox in Seattle. It was like a all ages club in the U District.
Okay.
And it was with Pretty Girls Make Graves, and I want to say Benton Falls. And
I love Benton Falls so much.
Right? Yeah. A deep cut, but a great band.
Yeah. It was funny. I was a long time ago. The Jealous Sound went back on tour. They put out an album, and I didn't realize it, but Michael Richardson, the guitar player, the singer for Benton Falls, was playing. I was like, is that who I think it is? Like, he was playing at gosh, where were they playing at? El Corazon, I think. That's where the show was at El Corazon. But it's like, oh my god, it's Michael Richardson. But he just kind of like disappeared. Like, but Benton Falls is like one of my favorite.
And it's funny because Michael, like, we went on to play, because he went on to play with the New Trust.
Yep.
For years, who Josh and Sarah, and we played with the New Trust, between the New Trust and the Velveteen, probably more than any other band.
Yeah.
But those guys are, those folks are family.
So okay, now it just clicked for me too, because on the Braid tour was Pretty Girls Make Graves as well, I believe.
I don't think so.
No?
Where was in Saraville? I don't think so. Because you said Braid, right?
Yeah.
It was
Murder by Death, maybe.
Was it maybe? I was just gonna say it was Murder by Death, and
that's who it was. Okay. For some reason, I get those two
Yeah.
murder graves. It all kind of
Yeah.
meshes together.
Yeah.
So you guys, you know, did you guys have initial momentum kind of going into Highly Refined Pirates, or like what could you tell that there was something there? Were you playing more shows? Like what was the transition into making Highly Refined Pirates?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of hit the ground running. I mean, especially with having the recording and the EP under our belt before we even, played our first
Right.
show. Um, so we were lucky in that, we did have some of that, like, members of cachet that we didn't really promote, but others promoted. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Um, and but it didn't hurt for some sort of like recognition and understanding of like, oh, these guys played in this, but they actually played this kind of music in this band. So it
Right.
really, threw people for a loop, I think.
Right.
Um, but I think there was a certain amount of, excitement, or at least interest in like, all right, let's go give these guys a shot. You're, a listen. It's also like, remember, this is the time of file sharing,
Right.
Napster, all that. And we were able to, roll into towns that we'd never played, but because of that file sharing situation, like, people were able to get a hold of the EP and know it. Like, they were familiar with it. So they kind of knew the songs, they kind of knew what um, to sort of expect. And then I think we were able to, deliver on the live show aspect, because I think a lot of people were like, how are they going to pull this
How are you gonna
shit
pull that
off?
off? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Line
And,
six.
some nights, yeah, some nights better than others, but it was like, oh, that motherfucker is playing that on a guitar. That's not a
Yeah.
keyboard, et cetera, et cetera. So, um, I think it created kind of a, maybe not the perfect storm, but a nice squall.
Yeah. and, and who'd you record Highly Refined Pirates with? Was that with Matt? Who did
No,
the
Matt was in the
engineering?
band, but we decided to go with somebody different, so that Matt could kind of just do keyboards, and we tapped Steve Fisk to produce and record that album. And I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Fisk, but like, he,
Not too much, no.
is a Seattle legend as far as like bands that who he worked with and recorded, all the grunge bands, and
Yeah.
uh, just, you can look at his discography and be like, oh, he recorded that, awesome. And so he was great. Yeah.
I was gonna ask the shit, just completely out my mind. But I mean the Highly Refined yeah, this is what it was. Highly Refined Pirates had a different name, right? When you first, like, it was under a different name. I thought I read somewhere, like, before you released it as Highly
Well,
Refined Pirates, you had to change the name.
no, we were released like an EP right before it that was kind of a teaser, um, called "Bands Love It When You Yell Yar at Them."
Yeah.
Um, and we did have, uh, what was it? It was like, it was also when that Streets album came, uh, original pirate material or
Imperial.
something.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, from what I can remember, it was always Highly Refined Pirates.
I feel like I read
Yeah.
somewhere, maybe Dave said something or something like that. It was supposed to be like Highly Refined Gentleman or something like that. And then, but there was some kind of, maybe I'm dreaming this. I don't like,
Yeah.
although,
It might have started out that way, but like, with all of our song titles and, album names, it was all basically just like a inside drunken joke.
yeah. Well, I was going to ask about that. I mean, like
Yeah.
that's kind of what made the juxtaposition between, I feel like, the intensity of the songs and just kind of the goofiness of And when I say intensity, I just mean like I look at it from a musical standpoint.
Hmm.
Like and versus just like the goofy names that you guys would
Hmm.
would throw on them. What was that just for the hell of it? Was it just like we just want to throw some humor in here and
Yeah, I mean, there were some real characters in the band that were pretty funny, and someone was always saying something funny and stupid that it was like, oh, that'd be a good, song title. And it was, there was a certain irreverence that we took to it. I think up until the point to where it became like that was the question that all like every publication wanted to talk to us about, was like, so what's up with those wacky song titles?
yeah,
And it, you know on one hand it was great because it drew people in and was like, oh, these guys are having a good time, like they're just you know not taking themselves too seriously. But then it kind of like, I don't know, I guess at a certain time or point it kind of started backfiring. We were like, no, like could we talk about the songs, like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
like other shit besides the song titles? Like
Right.
we would make it up because we were like, it doesn't, who
Yeah.
cares what it's called,
Yeah.
like we're not going to just name the song after the refrain and the chorus or whatever. Like that's
Right.
boring. It's boring to us. So it was, it definitely caught people's attention, and people loved it, but yeah, it was a blessing and a curse for sure.
Right.
I mean, I
Right.
look back at it now and I'm like, we should have never probably taken ourselves too seriously anyway. Like we should have just continued doing it. Like it's funny.
I mean, there was a certain from a fan's point of view. There was a certain charm to it, right? Because like uh, I remember very specifically for me, Minus the Bear was a technical band that was doing like amazing technical work, and but with this dance sensibility, this pop sensibility. I remember going to see you guys in Philadelphia with These Arms Are Snakes and Criteria, I think.
Mm, hmm.
And there was all these college students there, and you guys had just put out Menos So, and there was these girls there that were just like, I just want to dance, I just want to dance, and I was like, but do you understand the technical, like, like I was that guy, like not saying that, but I was like, these guys are brilliant, like, and that was always the draw for me when I heard Thanks for the Killer Game of Crisco Twister. I'd never heard a song like that before, not only with its catchiness and poppiness, but also that kind of technical guitar playing that was going on. And like to fuse those elements of math, tempo, and time signature, and also have this catchability to it was incredibly unique, that I don't know has been very much replicated. I mean, like you guys obviously had a lot of like bands that you were friends with and things like that. Was it hard to find like matching bands to go on tour with, or did you just go with whoever you wanted to go with?
Well, there's a couple things in there to unpack. I think the with what we were doing, we were allowed and afforded the opportunity to pick the bands that we wanted to go out with, regardless of genre, right?
Yeah.
Like uh, that Criteria, These Arms Are Snakes show, I believe also probably had POS, which was a hip hop rapper.
Yeah.
And so like we were able to do that, like especially with our headlining shows, was kind of be like, no, we don't need to just bring out another quote unquote math band or math rock band or indie rock band. Like we could bring our friends that were doing different things, or make new friends with people that were doing different things. And that for us always created you know more excitement in the shows, that when you did go to a Minus the Bear show, it wasn't just going to all be a tapping guitar band
Right.
bill,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You were going to hopefully find all sorts of different bands that you may not have found, um, and like like you said it, like, uh, it was always fun to look out in the crowd and be like, oh, all right, there's the math nerd that's counting out all of our songs
Yeah.
right next to the babe that's just dancing her ass off.
Yeah.
Or, like, um, we were able to bring in kind of a diverse crowd in that too, which I think is something that we always really appreciated. That it wasn't just like, because we couldn't really be easily pigeonholed. Um, we could we could bring in a wide swath of folks, and that's pretty awesome. I mean,
Yeah. No,
I really appreciate that we were able to do that. From college kids to some there were grandpas there sometimes that were like, oh, my kid turned me on to this, and I just love you guys. All I listen to is Steely Dan, and you
right.
guys are fucking great, and it was like, awesome, sweet.
Right. Like I can get down with adjacency to Steely Dan on that.
Yeah, totally.
um there was a band that I do remember the first time I ever saw you guys. um my brother ended up moving to Bellingham, Washington, which is where everybody, my entire family lives now. But
Cool.
he moved after school. We all lived in New Jersey, moved to Bellingham. But I went to go visit him. I remember during one of my breaks at school, and I was like, he's like, what do you want to do? Like, I mean, Bellingham is a way different town than it was now, just like Seattle's a way different city.
Sure.
But I was like,
Yep.
Mias the Bear's playing in Seattle, and he was like, who? And I was like, Mias the Bear. They're a band that I'd really like to go see. And so that was like the one thing I had to do and this was in like 2003. So we went down. You guys were playing the Pyramid anniversary
Oh yeah.
celebration outside, and
Yep.
the Helio sequence opened up there, played right before you guys, and I remember thinking like that got me into the Helio sequence as well, because they're incredible. But I thought you guys were also
Yeah, amazing.
incredibly matched, match up together as a band. But that was cool for me, because not only to get to expose my brother and a friend of mine, but like you're just playing at Pyramid outside. Like, I don't know if that many people were paying attention, but for me, it was like a really, really cool experience. And it was like the one thing that I really wanted to do. But getting exposed to other bands, like you said, that you guys were playing with was huge. I never really would have seen Braid or even really gotten into Braid had I not known you guys were going on tour with them. And I was like, I should probably brush up on this on this band called Braid. And then realizing their influence in the scene and all that stuff. You know, I have a very specific question. The EP, they make beer commercials like this. The song Hooray on Menos El Oso. Okay. That song Hooray written in the same time vein as you guys were doing they make beer commercials like this?
Yeah, I think it was.
It
And I
sounded
think,
to me very much like it belonged on that EP. Because Menos El Oso was a little bit of a deviation, not too much, but was like
mhm.
a different sounding album. And like Hooray was like my favorite, song on that album. And I was like, but this really reminds me of like, I was like, I wonder if it was written around like the same time, and it ended up being on Menos El Oso.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was, and I think we held on to it for Meadows. Memory gets a little foggy in
Sure.
that time frame, but yeah, I think you're right. Because it was, at least the music bit of Hooray I'm pretty sure was written, you know, uh, relatively early on uh, as far as Menos. So yeah, that would make sense
Okay.
for sure.
That Hooray by far to me is able to capture what it's like to have a snow day in the Pacific Northwest, where everything there's something very, very fond and familiar to it with me, where it's like the snow's coming, like everybody just kind of goes nuts for a little bit, and it's nice and quiet, but like it's Pacific Northwest, so you know it's not staying, or if it's staying for a long time because nobody has any fucking plows. Uh, um, so
Mhm.
that to me, every
Yeah.
time I listen, every time I listen to that song, I'm like that. That it to me is the epitome of capturing a feeling or capturing like a unique specific experience to a set group of people, like and I just think that's totally rad. Like my friends in New Jersey would not be able to relate to that song the way that I can relate to that song,
Yeah. Oh,
which I
that's
think is
awesome.
just like super cool. um I where does the name minus the bear come from?
Oh boy. Just real quick, but before we move on, I think
Yeah.
Jake has a particular knack for writing, uh, great lyrics, but also he is able to invoke a certain feeling and a uh, theme of Pacific Northwest. Like
Yeah.
he is a Pacific Northwest guy, and like he is able to kind of invoke those lake day feelings and emotions of just what the you know and even elsewhere too. I mean, Europe and
Right. Yeah.
traveling, but there is something specific that he's been able, I think, to really tap in, especially the Pacific Northwest. So that's great to hear. Um, the name minus the bear, you can Google it. It was a drunken uh, a, uh, a friend brought up. I'll go ahead and say it. A friend went on a date. We asked how that date went, and he said, "Well, it was a lot like that show minus, or it was a lot like that show BJ and the Bear
Minus the bear.
minus the bear."
Bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's funny. In all the
again,
years that I've been listening, all the years that I've been listening, like I never even thought to. I was like, oh, there's one. Wonder where that comes. Never thought
it's
to
it's
Google it.
it's always an awkward conversation. Let's put it that way. So
It's funny though.
yeah,
I mean, like,
yeah,
I mean, you guys kind
that's
of, yeah, you guys,
it's about
Manos,
a truck driver that has a chimpanzee for a
right?
buddy. Wild.
um, what was it like? I guess because I would say, and I think I started noticing the band becoming bigger and bigger when uh, Manos also came out, and that seemed to really kind of you guys kind of went off in a particular trajectory. Is that do you see it the same way, or look just as far as
Yeah, I think
popularity?
so. Sure. I mean, I think, yeah, I feel like we were probably feeling traction just with the tours and how they were going. Uh, it definitely, we were touring our ass off. When we weren't doing our own headlining shows, we were, main support with some great bands. And I think, you know, being able to be main support for some bands and you know have that moment where that everyone's there for the headliner, and they're like, you know say half the crowd doesn't know who the hell we are,
Yeah,
and to watch them from being mildly annoyed that they have to sit through another band before who they came for, to being like, oh, what the hell is this is all right, to then you know dancing and having a good time and kind of
Yeah.
having that, like watching that reaction, I think definitely kind of started around that time. And I think we were just becoming more confident in our live shows and kind of doing what we were doing and not really worrying about, you know, once again fitting into a particular genre, and just being able to win over a crowd. I think was very motivating for us for sure.
I mean, this might sound like a weird question, but did any of it feel fragile? Like, did any of it feel like this could be done at some point, or did it ever feel like this is something we have to hold on to, or was it just kind of like we're just going with the trajectory? I'm talking like the length, the entire length of things.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think all of us, you know, we started this band when we were kids, basically, like fresh 20s, figuring out how life works and what our place is in it. And yeah, there were definitely very fragile moments kind of throughout it. I think for everyone personally, everyone would have uh, a different experience with that.
Yeah.
You know, um, but I think in a certain way, momentum just kept us going. In that, like, we didn't know what the end was, but we knew that we just had to keep going until we got there.
Yeah.
You know, I think probably we could have stood to take some breaks, a little more than we did. But I think the sheer inertia did, keep us afloat and keep us going. Even when there were times where maybe we shouldn't, um, you know, uh, Meadow was a tough one for me. My mom was passed away, and um, I probably should have taken a break, you know. But 3 months later, I was back on the road, and just kind of not dealing with things. So so, but it to me at the same time, it felt fragile in that, like, if we didn't keep going, then what?
Right.
So it was I think, like I said, the sheer inertia of the band, and it wasn't just me. It was four other guys. Like, we all just had to keep going. And I think everyone would probably point out a point in the band that they were like, "Oof, maybe I need to take a break," but didn't, because there were four other guys that were all just kind of steamrolling ahead. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it was, I don't know, wouldn't change anything, but I think that because we knew that, it, just by the nature of the business, it's fragile. Um, that I think there was a bit of a fear of taking a break, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's what we did. We just forged ahead and carried on.
And hindsight's always 2020, right? Like, so
Of course.
like when you look back and you're like, well, maybe we should have taken a break or something like that. It's, I don't know, sometimes it's coping, right? It's a coping mechanism to go and play, and it's therapeutic and in many
100%. Yeah.
many different ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was touring always a good experience for you personally, or I mean, I can imagine it has its ups and downs, but like on the whole, was touring always like I'm looking forward to touring, or were there times where you were kind of like, this sucks, I don't feel like playing tonight, or like I didn't get any sleep, you know, like, or was touring your bread and butter, like something that invigorated you and kept you going?
Yeah, it was definitely our bread and butter. So that was definitely a motivator. Um, and I personally, I always did enjoy touring. That was the work, right? Like that was the that was the good stuff. Like that that was part of the deal for me. And I think, having been raised in a family with with my dad that wanted to do music and that had toured, like to me, that was like, that's the job.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. You got to go out and play shows, and that's how you make money. And you get in front of people and you play your ass off. And at the end of the night, you get a check, and then you go to the next town and repeat. Um, so I always looked at, me personally, like my music career, like that's the job, man. Like you go out and you play shows. It wasn't like waiting around to see if like a music a supervisor picked your song up for a movie or a commercial for French fries at McDonald's. Like
Yeah.
that's like winning a lottery, right? Like
Right. Right.
that's not work. That's not the work. The work is going out and touring and playing shows. And I mean, you know, fucking Smokey Robinson is still playing shows at the
Yeah.
casinos. The Rolling Stones are still playing shows at the Coliseum. Like
Yeah.
you don't. That's music. Like that is like uh that's the gig, baby. Like that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
Um, and there is something different, like that exchange of getting 100 or 1,000 or several thousand people in one room, all listening and vibing out on you know your music. Like that's the job,
Yeah.
and it's a special one. So I never really took it for granted as far as like, ugh, I don't want to tour. Like I was like, oh, we get to tour, and chances are those shows are going to be good because we've worked our ass off to get to that point. um Now, all that said, yeah, there were definitely shows that I didn't want to play, and that were hard. I mean, I crushed my L4, L5 in my spine, and crushed my sciatic nerve, and for about 2 years was fucked up, and had to, like, there was one tour that I would crawl from the back of the bus
God.
to the stage for sound check. I would then crawl back to the bunk and wait for the show. And then when the show happened, I would crawl from my bunk to the stage and get through a set. The first tour, I had to sit down. There was a couple shows where I laid down on the fucking stage and played. Uh, but like, what else was I gonna do? Was I gonna tell the other four guys like, oh, we're gonna have to cancel this tour? I mean,
And there was never a thought of
that's a
like we we could use a replacement for a tour or
well,
like
the four shows that I did not play with Minus the Bear, we enlisted Ben Verellen uh, to play a couple shows so I could go get surgery. Um, you know, I'm sure it was probably a conversation that those guys had. Was like, but you know, I didn't I didn't want to see that happen.
I was gonna say,
You know,
yeah, yeah. There's to me that there's something really interesting or something that's really cool, but I'm curious. Like, you guys were been doing it for so long. You only had one significant band member change, like when Matt left, and then you had Aaron when he left.
later on, yeah.
Yeah, later on, but like the idea of keeping 4 or 5 guys together, sane and not at the point of like, I don't know what, there's had to be something like magical there in the sense for you guys to want to keep doing this together. And to even have that mentality too of like, fuck, nobody's gonna replace me. Like this is it. This is what I do. I mean, there's so you see lots and lots of bands break up. You see lots of bands that stay together for a long time as well. But like, there has to be something like what kept you in it for so long. What kept all of you guys in it for so long? I know you could probably only speak to yourself, but like,
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, look, I'm not going to lie and like, uh, I'm sure those guys had a whole list of potential bass players that, hey, let's try to, let's maybe do something different. But I don't know, stubbornness. Uh, Again, thinking I'm too, or just being dumb enough to think that no, I got this, I got this. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I do think there was something and something magic, something special about the core of us uh, that was able to translate, you know, uh, to this, to the stage and on and off. You know, there's I could think of a million better bass players, right? Like, uh, but for whatever reason, I was able to, hang in there and hold on. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think all of us probably had moments of being like, ooh, I don't, this is not the way I want it to be. But you know, um, speaking personally, like I always had a devotion to the band to see it to the end as far as we could make it, whatever that meant. Um, I wanted to make sure that I could do everything I could to see this project out because it was so important to me. Um, and I think we were able to do that. Um, but yeah, I wanted to see the whole thing out. So I fought tooth and nail for it.
yeah. You guys have had so many albums. Like, how did you keep things fresh?
Ah,
That's a pretty
keep things
general
fresh.
question,
Yeah.
but like, I mean, like, did you approach? Was it natural, or was there like we need to change things up on this album, or like, as far as because that could be. And let's just talk about for you personally. Coming into different albums and being like, no, I don't want to do this again, or like I feel like I should change it up on the bass, or like coming with new ideas each time, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think everyone wanted to keep things different. No one wanted to repeat the you know, same album. Like we never wanted to just be like, okay, let's write Highly Refined Pirates 2 or,
Right.
Planet of Ice 2. It was like I think I think it's just the nature of us as humans and like experiencing new things and being exposed to new music and meeting people on the road that would inspire us that it we didn't get stagnant in that way because we were kind of always exposed to different experiences
Yeah.
um and uh I think from the get-go, like we were talking earlier, we never really felt ourselves being able to be pigeonholed into a certain genre. And we just continued that, like
Yeah.
um I think it depended on what we were listening to at the time, both collectively and personally. Planet of Ice was, a direct result of us spending enough time in the van together, listening and kind of getting inspired by old like prog rock. And that being like, oh, this is something we can all you know, uh, you know, almost joined forces with, even though like everyone kind of got into, a different subgenre of prog rock,
Yeah, yeah.
and then we're able to come together, and I think we always wanted to challenge ourselves. I think that was the biggest thing, is like we never wanted to be bored with what we were doing.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a real strong motivator for sure.
What did it when did you know things were kind of done?
Um, I mean, whole plethora of signs, like
Yeah.
uh, uh, just how we dealt with each other personally, how we dealt with business aspects, what was going on in our life. Like, I think it just kind of got to the point to where it was like, all right, time
It's time.
for something different.
Yeah.
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 Um, yeah, just I can't really say one thing was the deciding factor. It was a plethora of reasons, which
Yeah.
that's just life, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
It's not always like, oh, it was this or it was that. It's like, man, it's just fucking life, dude.
Yeah. I mean, you spent the majority of your, you know, young adult and, a significant amount of your adulthood in this band,
Yeah.
as,
Yeah.
like not many people get to say that. You know, I'm wondering for you what it was like, what the transition was like out of it, like moving on from it.
Um, I mean, admittedly, I mean, you know, I think we all kind of saw, you know, maybe not the end date, but the end like on the horizon, um, for a plethora of reasons. But I mean, I knew that I would need to, if if I wasn't doing this band, then I would need to figure out what I was doing, you know, beforehand. Like I didn't want to just end up in a situation where we're like, all right, all right, all right, this is our last show, and now what?
Yeah, yeah,
Like I knew that for me was just not going to be good. And so I think I started seeking out different outlets, um, you know, a little earlier on, as far as, making visual art. And that started out as just a way to communicate to people in a way other than the band,
yeah,
in a way that wasn't part of a collective or a committee. It was like, all right, I need to start working on things for myself, and I actually need to start taking the time to explore who I am as an individual, um, and not wait for the last show, or the day
yeah.
after the last show to figure that out. Like that just wasn't gonna work.
Gonna happen. Yeah,
So that's the way I dealt with it. I
yeah.
mean, is starting to make visual art and just kind of uh, put my voice out there as an individual, as opposed to part of a collective.
When did you move back to Santa Fe?
Moved back to Santa Fe in 2019. Was it 2019? Yeah, it was. Um, so basically, when was the last shows? 2018. Couple months after. So yeah, our last shows were in December, and my wife and I packed up our bags and the house, and headed out. I think in March of the following year, and you know, uh, kind of knew that once the band was done, that her and I would be making a big move, or it would
Yeah,
be an opportunity to change our lives, and start doing some other things that we knew we wanted to do. So Santa Fe was, New Mexico was the general idea, and we, again, didn't know what we'd be doing. Uh, didn't know where we'd be living exactly, but just kind of believed in like, all right, this is the time to do it. So let's do it.
Yeah.
So,
So what are you doing?
and happy we did.
Yeah. What are you doing? And what are you passionate
Yeah.
about?
What am I doing? I am working at a living history museum
Oh,
in
cool.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's uh, basically covers the time period of the Spanish colonial uh, expedition conquest and up until about the territorial times of the late 18 early 1900s. And it's a piece of property that has been that was on the road from Mexico City to Santa Fe. There was a big trade route um, because Santa Fe was the colonial capital of New Spain. So there was a connection from Santa Fe down all the way down to Mexico City, and along this road there was this what they call a paraja, which was a layover place, like a basically think of a Motel 6
Sure.
on Highway 66.
Yeah.
Um, and it was either the first stop out of Santa Fe or the last stop into Santa Fe, and it's kind of where you'd be on a trek from Mexico City for 6 months up to Santa Fe, and you would stop there, get ready for the big city of Santa Fe. So it's just got this crazy history. So weird twist of events, fell in love with water and irrigation, and an ancient practice of using the acequias, which is like a canal dug by people that is used to move water to fields. And fell in love with that, and an opportunity at this living history museum popped up that my sister happened to be working at.
Cool.
She said, I don't know what you're up to, but the ranch is hiring someone, and I just figured I'd let you know. And at the time, I'd been making art paintings through the pandemic, and really just busting out paintings pretty consistently. And so when she let me know, I was like, fuck. Like, I guess I'm going to have to try this out because it sounds like a pretty good opportunity. Because there's three things I love, like New Mexico, history, and water.
That's awesome.
And so it kind of clicked all the boxes
Yeah.
off. So yeah, long story short, I'm I work in operations and work with the irrigation systems. And then I also,
So you're not
one
a
of my
character
first
actor.
projects, I am not a character actor. I do not dress up. No, I actually take care of the place.
Gotcha.
And make sure it's running and things are green. But I also, one of my first projects was setting up a hops field.
Yeah.
So I grow hops as well, kind of on a place where the public doesn't go.
Nice.
But
what kind of varietals
yeah,
do you do?
I wear many hats. Varieties: Chinook, Zeus. We do have a noble hop that we just started growing. So it's been a lot of fun, a lot of sweat.
Yeah, a lot of I hate taking those fuckers down. But the first time I did it, I didn't necessarily know, like I had gloves because I had one was growing in like my friend's house, and I used to brew and stuff like that. But I didn't know about the binds and I was like, motherfucker, like this hurts.
Yeah.
Like doing this.
Yeah.
But I guess I wouldn't have thought of Santa Fe as being climately like like the Pacific Northwest is, you can grow Columbus and Cascade and like all that stuff. But I mean, I don't know, you can grow them in Australia and stuff like that too. I just never thought Santa Fe and hops was, not my
Well,
radar.
we're high desert, and you think the places that really traditionally grow the hops, like in Washington is Eastern Washington, right?
Yakima,
so it's like like long, hot, dry summers.
Yeah.
So we're kind of perfectly suited. We're about as south latitude wise that they they do well, just because you want those long summer days, because they are such fast growers and you want to get them up there, up to the top as fast as possible. But yeah, I mean, the ranch that we're at, we're kind of a special spot. Like we have that, we're in this little valley, and it's yeah, just it's been well suited for it, for sure.
Are you doing for private consumption or
We're, we're partnering with a local brewery
cool.
at the moment, and they kind of do a Golandrinus brew every year. And then, depending on how the crop goes, we're in discussions with other folks.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I got to go pick up my kids from daycare.
Yeah.
I totally appreciate you doing this, man. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk to you. And just, My Spare is one of my favorite bands. We're always a pleasure and a joy to watch on stage. It was for me, one of the highlights was watching you play on stage, because you were so animated and so into it. So, thank you so much for the music that you put out, and what you guys personally meant to me. It's one of the cool things about the podcast is that I just get to talk to people whose music has inspired me or touched me in some way. So I really appreciate that. So thanks for coming on. I really mean it.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. I know this has been a little while in the making, so thanks for being patient.
No, it's awesome. I'm just happy I get to do it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate the sentiment. Like, folks like you really were what, like, to go back to maybe a previous question, like the fact that, folks like you did come out to so many shows and like we're so passionate about the band, like that's why we did it, year after year. And maybe, that's why I didn't quit, like that's why I fought so hard to stay on that stage and to be able to do what we do. And I mean, honestly, like it's the fans are what I miss, and being able to have that interaction, every night playing live like that truly kept me going through the darkest of dark. And I can't thank you guys enough, so I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time, man. Hey, that does it for this episode. I'd like to thank my guest, Cory Murchy, again for just coming on and talking all things My Family's life. If you like this podcast, please consider subscribing. You can find us on all major podcasting platforms. You can also find us on Instagram at The Scenecast. Thanks again for listening.